Hi, this is Dovid Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And from the sound of that roarous applause, you can tell that we are back in the Rabbi Orlofsky studios. I am not on Zoom. Look, you can see my arm no matter where I move it. There's no disappearing things. The background doesn't suddenly vanish and you see my bathrobe hanging up on the wall behind me. Which I've always found slightly awkward, particularly when I'm in it. But in any event, I have to do the rest of my intro. So whether you are watching with our friends over at Torah Anytime, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts, as always, we are happy to have you along for this special 3rd anniversary show of the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. 3 years. I don't think I've done anything consistently for 3 years. I mean, okay, I married 40 years this Sivan, but I didn't have to do very much. I let my wife carry the ball. But, 146 episodes. And I used to think at the beginning, what am I going to talk about? And it turns out I've got no problem. I got lots to talk about. So we're starting now our 4th year, which is going to be very exciting. So who is our sponsorship for this very, very special anniversary show? This episode I'm reading is sponsored anonymously by Dovid Bressler. I don't know. Anyway, as a thank you to Hashem for everything He has given me. There's an old Jewish joke. I collect all types of jokes. There's an old Jewish joke. I, Harry Rabinowitz of Rabinowitz Ladies Wear on 232 Orchard Street, do hereby donate $100,000 anonymously. Anyway, obviously, Reb Dovid has a sense of humor, and that's what you need to come in on this podcast. If you don't have a sense of humor, what are you going to do? There is a condition that has been identified. It's called being humor impaired. People don't get the joke. Dave Barry once wrote a whole article about this. What does it mean to be humor impaired? So it's not that you don't think the joke is funny. You just don't even realize there was a joke. So it's a Baruch Hashem when you find somebody who has a sense of humor. So that's it. This is our anniversary show. We have a lot of treats for you. And a lot of effort has gone into this program over the years. None of it by me. I just sit here and talk. That's all that I am qualified to do. Yeah? So those who do, those who can't teach, right? Those who can't teach become famous speakers. And that's what I do. I travel around and I talk. And very often an organization will bring me in and they understand that I cannot be held responsible for myself. So they pick me up and they drive me to the house where I'm staying and they tell my host, have him ready at this time. And I get down, I get in the car, they drive me to the place, they stand me up, they say talk, then they put me back in the car, they bring me back to the next place, they put me on a train. They understand that I'm not really meant to do things on my own. So I thought, this being an anniversary show, it's time for a retrospective. I'm going to be married 40 years in Sivan. June 14th, we got married Flag Day, which, is a very special yontif. And, that's why we didn't have to say tacht and have to fast or anything. But it's also Chav Gimel Sivan, which is in the Megillah. Yeah, very important date mentioned in the Megillah. So that's when we got married 40 years ago. And I look exactly the same. I have not aged at all. I got old early, and that way I never aged. My wife is similar. She still doesn't age. In fact, I remember for our 25th wedding anniversary, we went out, and we had one of the babies with us, whoever the baby was at the time. And this other couple says, "Oh, is that your first baby?" Says to my wife. She says, "No, it's my 10th or 11th, whatever." She says, "Really? You look so young." And then she looked at me. And then she looks back at my wife and says, "You look so young." But I figure if one of us has to age, I'm glad it was me. You know what I mean? Because, it's okay. If you remember George Bush and his wife, Barbara, so she looked like his mother. It's like a little uncomfortable. So, if somebody has to age, it should always be the man. Because when men age, they become more distinguished. Thank you very much. Anyway, I know when I got a haircut recently, I said to the guy, why are you giving me a used, sheet over here? Because it's filled with all this gray and white hair. Obviously, some old man was here before me. Being an Israeli with no sense of humor, he, of course, said, no, this is all from you. I said, thank you very much. In any event, we're back, and I have, which was here in the studio, that's why I didn't have access to it during Corona, my official Rabbi Orlofsky mug, which is going to have to change. Everything has to change after 3 years. Because the times, they are changing, said a Jewish guy named Robert Zimmerman. Yeah. And we're going to be having a lot of changes. So I thought this would be a wonderful time for a retrospective and also for a look forward. Because you have to look back and you have to look forward. And you're in the present. I'm in the present. That means that there's hu haya, hu haveh, hu yeh. There's a past, there's a future, and there's a present. And, the past is gone. The future is unknown. All you have is today, and I can tell you, having almost died 7 years ago, 2 major doctors told me I was supposed to die. Apparently they were wrong. Or I was supposed to die. Kosh Baruch Hu decided to leave me here. Yeah. I'm sure I told the story already that when my brother passed away, my mother was quite distraught. She was in her 80s and she lost a son in his 60s. And, how do you console a mother? And she would say to everybody, why? Why did God do this? Why didn't he take me? I said, God, take me, take me. Why did he take Jason? He still had children to marry off. Why did he take Jason? Why didn't he take me? Nobody knew what to say. So I was after my operation. I couldn't fly. So I called up to make a shiva call. And she said it to me. Why? Why did Jason die? Why not me? I said, because God likes Jason. He wanted to have him close to him. You're just a cranky old lady. He'll get to you eventually. But, you're not that much fun, Mom. So he decided to take Jason. She said, that's the first thing anybody said that makes any sense to me. So it could be I'm still alive just because God didn't want me. But you wake up every day and you say, listen, every day is a gift. People say to me, how you doing? I said, Baruch Hashem. They said, no, how are you really doing? I said, no. When you wake up in the morning and you open your eyes, when you realize you're on borrowed time, then I'm not even supposed to be here. And that's why when we have problems, and we have problems in my family, everybody has problems, and things get bad, I said, listen, honey, I was supposed to die 7 years ago. That would be much worse. The worst thing is when you have one of those simchas and everyone has to go, I know Abba is up in Shemayim looking down, and everyone's like, oh man, just killed the whole party, So instead they say, Abba's over here. He's totally out of it. He has no idea what's going on. But at least he's still here, so we don't have to make one of those maudlin speeches, you know what I mean? So every day, it's a gift. That's why it's called the present. I get it, big gift. Okay. Anyway, Shmuel Kunda had a tape years ago, and there was that one line. He goes, I would like to request your presence. At my daughter's getting married, I'd like to request your presence. He says, oh, I'm sorry, I can't make it. He goes, I don't want you, I want your presence. That's the gift. So, it's the fact that you have a day, it's wonderful. So we're going to look back and we're going to look forward. And all of that comes down to one individual, and that is the mysterious producer Michoel. I've been talking about Michoel since the first podcast, and no one really believes he exists. He thinks he's a character that I created in order to be able to, hide behind people and say, well, you have to talk to the producer, or my producer won't let me do it, or the producer did this, and we used to have all those crazy things with the Rabbi Orlofsky sign, and I used to say, well, it's the producer. He goes, oh, come on, there is no producer. So now it's 3 years of the Rabbi Orlofsky show, and we would like to introduce to you my producer, Michoel. All right, so I've been telling the story about how this podcast started many times, but I assume that you have a different version.
Well, a few, actually. So how far back do you want me to go?
All right, well, I'll tell you where it came in. I was in yeshiva with your father, which has nothing to do with anything. But
you missed 5,000 years of history.
When he was a bacher, he used to.
Okay.
So first God created the world.
Okay, good.
But when he was a bacher, he used to come over our house for a Shabbos Suda. It's like that's how far back we go, But that had nothing to do with it because I didn't make the association originally, and I had a website and I had lots of recordings up there and different things on there. And the people who were running it decided that they didn't want to do it anymore. So rather than offering to me to take it over, they just closed it down and I lost all of my material and recordings that I never got back and everything was erased and I lost everything. And that went on probably for a couple of years. And then you called me out of the blue. I had no idea who you were. And you said, how come you don't have a website? And I said, because I had one, they closed it down. He goes, do you want one? And I said, sure, because you want me to make you one. I said, okay. So you want a Facebook page? I was like, sure. I could link the two of them together. Now, at that point, you lost me completely. I know I had heard of Facebook. I never heard of linking things together. And I was like, sure. And that was the beginning. And that's how I recall the introductory phase.
Well, that's approximately right.
What am I missing?
Well, for starters, most people don't know this, but we go back 25 years.
Okay.
Well, apparently, when my parents first visited Israel in probably 90, sometime like late 96, apparently we came to your house. I was 6 months old.
Oh yeah, now I remember. You're taller now.
They say everyone has childhood trauma.
The beard's the same.
I just found mine.
That explains it.
Anyway, so fast forward, I don't know, it was, So the way it goes. My father used to have like your CDs in his car and stuff. So I'd heard the name all around, and you keep mentioning what you always kept mentioning over the years was this mythical shiurim series,
right?
And I couldn't find the recordings anywhere.
No.
So it didn't exist. There was a little stuff on Torah time. There's a bunch of obscure websites lying around the web that have a bunch of shiurim. Now there's been an explosion of these big Torah video sites, but they didn't really exist at the time.
Right.
And so there's this thing called the Achim Seminar. It's I think there's this guy Chaim Hirsch runs it.
Yeah.
You were a speaker there every year. So I was in yeshiva at the time. And I went 1 year and I really liked it. You were one of the speakers, and I was like, great, okay, that was fine. The second year, maybe this was 2 years after that, I brought my younger brother. There he is, but audience disclosure.
He's off camera. Anyway, yeah.
For the time being,
there is no younger brother. This isn't even Michoel. Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
So we've already established that.
He's just some guy we found to bring in and sit here and pretend. Anyway, yeah.
I'm just closing my contract. Give me a second. Where's my lawyer?
That's right.
Either way, so there was actually
So you went to the Achim Seminar.
So you were the speaker. It was on Motzei Shabbos, and this was the night that Rav Moshe Shapiro was nifter. He was nifter on a Shabbos, right? If I'm not mistaken, and this was a Motzei Shabbos.
Right.
So you announced it there, and that really struck me. And afterwards, there was a whole bunch of guys talking, and I asked you about this mythical shiurim thing, and there was nothing available. And you said maybe your website, this, that. So I asked you about the website thing, and that we ended up meeting a number of times. That's sort of where that came out of.
Wow.
And the funny thing is that so everyone wants to know where is this series, and the answer is
in a box in my closet.
That's actually true.
Cassettes. I have a whole bunch of cassettes.
Loads of them.
And you have to transfer them over. Now, there's this thing called this high-speed converter, which, by the way, the state of Israel is introducing now. A high-speed converter. It's a little political joke there. Anyway, but the new religious minister. Anyway, but can I tell you a joke about a high-speed converter? Yeah, I heard this from Reb Meir Horowitz, who's now the boss of the Rebbe in Har Nof. He says this non-Jew converts to Judaism just before Rosh Chodesh Shvat. So, by the Hasidim especially, they have a big Suda on every occasion, including Rosh Chodesh. So Rosh Chodesh Shvat, they have a Suda. Tu B'Shvat, they have a Suda. Rosh Chodesh Adar Aleph, they have a Suda. Purim Cotton, they have a Suda. Rosh Chodesh Adar Beis, they have a Suda. Purim, big Suda. Yeah. Rosh Chodesh Nisan, they have a Suda. Pesach, a whole week of Sudas. Rosh Chodesh Iyar, they have a Suda. Lag BaOmer, they have a Suda. Pesach Sheni, they have a Suda. Rosh Chodesh Sivan, they have a Suda. Shavuos, they have a Suda. So he meets a guy who used to be one of his friends when he was not Jewish. He says, how is it being Jewish? He goes, it's the most unbelievable thing. Every 2 weeks, they have a big party. He says, really? Food and drink and schnapps. It's unbelievable. So he goes to the Rav and he says, I want to convert. He says, okay, it's a long process. No. I want it fast-tracked. I'll do whatever I have to do. I'll study whatever it is. I'll take any test. And he rushes it through and he converts right after Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. 2 weeks later, Shavuos B'Tammuz. And 2 weeks after that, Rosh Chodesh Av. 9 days. Tisha B'Av. He says to his friend, he goes, what happened? He goes, it just hasn't been the same religion since you joined. Anyway,
as so it's all in the timing.
It's all in the timing. So I have to transfer these cassettes over. This is now the truth of the matter is that there's an evolution to this concept of the Mesilas Yesharim Shir. So that's from my very first set of shiurim that I gave in Har Nof 30 years ago, and which is actually how I started. I started giving a shiurim Mesilas Yesharim, and then people asked me for the cassettes. So I didn't.
Wait, that was before like your Parsha things and like
before everything.
Wait, so it's what started it all.
What started it all was there was somebody in Har Nof who wanted to have speaker, make a shiur in their house. So they had a tryout. Rebbetzin Heller, myself, a few other people, and they, after much discussion, decided they wanted Rebbetzin Heller. She wasn't available. The second person wasn't available. So eventually they came to me. And I said, all right, I'll do Mesilas Yesharim. And after a couple of shiurim, people asked me for copies of the tape. I didn't know how to make copies of tapes. So
people don't know either.
So Rav Yohanan Alprin used to make tapes. So I said, how do you make tapes? He goes, there's this woman, Meir Sharm, and you have to walk up all these stairs, and she's got all of this equipment, and she makes cassette tapes. Makes copies of cassette tapes. And I started making these cassette tapes, and I started selling them. And somehow they caught on. And people started seeing them in America. People started inviting me to speak. All kinds of things. It all came out of that original Mesilas Yesharim shir that I had. Those were those tapes. So I still have copies of all those tapes, but I have to make them into digital files now. So at some point, I sent them over to somebody in America who turned them into CDs. So I might be able to find the CDs. I don't even know if I can. But if I can get all the CDs, that's easier to copy over. But in the meantime, I have cassettes. So you have to transfer them over. And that's, like I said, that's already more technical than I can do, So I started with these cassettes. So that's why I have a box of them at home, So, but they have to be made into digital files. So since then, I've given the shir in different places and different things. And it's obviously evolved. So that original set of tapes, I would like to think that, for a while I was giving one in Ramat Eshkol. I made tapes of those, and those already I turned into CDs. And so it much longer, obviously I come up with much more material to say. You pick up more life experience. I give a shir in Toastone in Mesilas Yesharim, and it is probably the slowest Mesilas Yesharim shir I give.
What are you up to now?
We're still in Perek Vav at the beginning, and we just came back after the break because we break for Cheshvan, and I chazered over a line that I did the last time, and I went into another explanation of it. So we basically reviewed 3 words. That's what we did. And the shir, which is supposed to be an hour, went on for an hour and 20 minutes. So
you've been doing this one for 2 years now, I think.
At least. So, there's different types. So I gave one.
So that's 3 prakim a year, right?
It depends on the year. At the rate we're going, it keeps slowing down. It gets moving slower and slower. So we should fill this Mesilas Yesharim probably by 2042, 2043, something like that.
I'll put it on the calendar.
In fact, it was the first of my shiurim to go back live in person after Corona.
Oh, this one in Hillstone?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so a few people stayed on the Zoom, but Zoom, chavnish kein tam, you want to see the people, Anyway, so So that's so I've given different Mesil Shisham. Sure, I don't know how valuable the first tapes are. Although I met a Chashiva Rosh Hashiva who told me that he teaches Mesil Shisham from those cassettes.
Oh wow!
So there's one place not to go. In any event, so you wanted the Mesil Shisham tapes, and they were in a big box in my room.
Yes, I mean, as an aside, we're good at those. So I actually, over the course of
you made this logo, by the way.
Yeah, that's actually our original, which you're actually about to start phasing that out, or with our whole rebrand for this new year. That's going to be rolling out over the next few months.
We're phasing this out,
but let's get the new one printed first. You have to still have to be able to drink.
I'm just kidding. This was made for me, special by a dear friend, and even if we change the logo, then I'll just take this home. And this will be...
That's for the museum.
My Rabbi Orlofsky museum. Yes, indeed.
There's all sorts of things in there. We got a persimmon, I think, from the first one. You still have it somewhere.
Hanukkah decorations.
The original sign, I think.
When you covered the bookcases in plastic during Pesach, I was like...
You wanted to do silver foil, but that was a little... Getting them taped up was a problem.
That's true.
And also the reflections are absolutely horrible.
So you asked about the Mesil Shisham, and I said I don't have them because I don't have a website.
Yeah, right. So aside, I actually did get a hold of those. So the long and short version of that is they're actually, just as if anyone's interested in those, there actually are many, many different versions as you give them over the years. And over my time, having access to pretty much all we have over here, I've been helping myself, and I've actually listened to at least the first few program. And it's funny how you actually give them very different ways based on where you are. Like I listened to one version that you gave, I think, at Rabbi Center's yeshiva at one point. And then I also listened to the same shiurim that you gave in Darchei Bina. It's like the same content, but it's totally different. Like I forget what the context was, but there was one where you had like a medrash that it took you like 3 shiurim to properly explain it. So in one of them, in one of the places, it took like 3 shiurim just to deal with that one medrash, and the other one it was like you had the whole thing stuffed into like a corner, and you were talking about something else entirely. And it's sort of the shiur morphs depending on who you're talking about. And we actually have a number of online classes now that also are going through it. But I've actually never been through the complete set.
So, also Rabbi Center, who's much cooler than I am, he would every now and then tell me, that's not appropriate. And I didn't know. For example, it's no longer around anymore, but there used to be this magazine called Mad Magazine. I used to read it back in the 60s. It was
my grandfather talks about it.
Yeah, it was a silly thing, And they had this little cartoon called Spy versus Spy. So I was talking about that once, And he says to me, you can't quote Mad Magazine because it's now filled with inappropriate material. I said, I didn't know. I mean, I haven't seen it since 1965, you know what I mean? So, so he would, the shiurim that I gave by Rabbi Centers would be dramatically different because, he would make sure that everything was kosher v'yosher for his boys. Didn't want to shock anybody. Darchei Bina was a little looser. Some other shiurim, I say whatever I want, especially now I'm at the point where I have to be very careful, though, because in the podcast, because we have all kinds of people who are listening.
That's very true.
We're also on Nucky Radio.
That's true.
Which is only very, very clean material. And they banned me once.
I got a very strange email from them.
This is not so Nucky. It's a little schmutzadig. Because, you pick up certain things when you deal with all kinds of people, especially if you work in Kiruv and different kind of things, that not everybody's prepared to hear, and you have to present it in a different way. We live in a much more sterilized environment. There was a story with Rabbi Yaakov, where whatever the whole story was, but at the end he said, if it was me, I would have thrown him down the steps. And Jonathan Rosenblum, give him a little shout out for those of you who may not be familiar with his tremendous body of work. And he mentioned me in his column in Mishpacha. Anyway, so when he wrote the biography, he changed it to, I would have shown him to the door. To which I add, at the top of the steps. So, not everything that was said once upon a time you can still say. So, yeah. So I gave different kinds of Mesil Shisham. There's no question about it.
Yeah, so those are all over the place. Either way, that's what started it all, and then we went to the website, and as you sort of put that together, we had a lot of your shiurim and so on. We actually tried doing a blog for a while, but that sort of didn't really work out because
because I never gave you any material.
Well, it happened once in a while.
That was one of the reasons that people closed it down. They were upset at me because I didn't keep giving them content. And I said, Michoel never does that. He just made up content. He would make up posts from Rabbi Orlofsky.
I
And I was
just
like,
kept
yeah,
scraping them from Hamudia's archives. Like, he wrote those.
Yeah, it's more or less the same, If you listen to me enough, then you could basically, anybody could make up my stuff, So it's like, but that has that distinctive Rabbi Orlofsky sound to it. People say to me sometimes, do you mind if I steal your jokes and stories? I said, absolutely not, because nobody will recognize them when I say them over. I spoke at Kerev Tuni. You ever hear of Kerev Tuni? It's a Hasidic Chizuk organization. Anyway, I show up. If you take a look, it was like 25 pictures. All of them with Streimelach and me. and a psychologist. That was it.
They didn't Photoshop a Stremel on you?
They did not Photoshop it. They kept me just as I was. And almost all the speakers...
It can be arranged for the right price.
Almost all the speakers were Yiddish, and I was speaking in English, me and the psychologist. Anyway, so... But when I first come in there, a guy comes over to me and says, listen, I'm just going to give you a heads up. Don't say any of your usual material. I said, why? He says, because I stole it all. I said it over in my name, and everyone will think you're stealing it from me.
Well, how did it work out?
So I have enough material. It's not a problem, I can, Lahavdil, Reb Moshe Shapiro, gave a hezber on the Gemara of Arba Nichnasu Pardes. Right? Before people go into the orchard, and the whole thing is Kabbalah,
Yeah, for sure.
The Pardes, Pshat, Remez, Drash, he gave a whole explanation. And 6 months later, he says, this is like the Gemara of Arba Nichnasu Pardes, which I want to be Masbir now, I want to explain it. So someone said, you explained it 6 months ago. And he looks at him and says, don't worry, I won't repeat myself. So there's enough material to say. So in any event, yeah. So we tried to blog. You tried to blog. I never actually looked at the website. I don't even know what's there.
I should check on it, actually. You never know these days.
Yeah.
Either way, so we tried that, and then for a while it was just mostly shiurim. So on, we spoke about whether, because previously we used to buy all of them.
Yeah.
And nowadays I tell people it's hard enough to get them to listen to free shiurim, which is true enough. It's like you look at what people, because something that we found, for example, with the podcast is that people are basically interested in being entertained, and they're gonna get whatever entertainment they want, which is why if you look at like our numbers, for example, the most popular episodes, they're ones where we had an interesting guest on, and those sorts of things, because it's like some people just showing up and they want to listening to someone talk, and some people just want to be entertained, and if we're up against any, it's the amount of entertainment material that's out there is so vast.
The mystery to me is, if you add up all the numbers, it's what, 2,000-3,000 people that we know about? Less?
Well, it depends where.
Okay. I'm saying from all the websites, I've never been able to come up with more than, let's say, 2,000, maybe 3,000, from all the different places.
The early Taurian time is pretty busy these days, but it used to be closer to 3 to 5,000, and so on. It moves around. That's all in the title. That's the hardest part of the show for me.
There's a guy who makes Leitzonis. The whole thing is just Leitzonis. He's got like 40,000 views. It's a mystery to me. And my kids say to me, Abba, because people don't want any content. Any content. And, So the podcast, so I'll tell you from my point of view what happened. 3 things happened. One is I started watching Ben Shapiro. And I found it absolutely fascinating. He had a podcast. He has an enormous amount of people. He speaks about conservative politics. But he wears a yarmulke, and every now and then he'll say Dvar Torah, he'll say something on the Parsha, he'll say something on the Haftarah, I was fascinated by this medium, yeah. And then somebody calls me up, he has a podcast, which evidently is somewhat popular. And he asked me to speak, he asked if he could interview me, and I was not happy with the interview for a lot of reasons that I don't want to go into now. I'll say one thing, because one thing is whenever I have guests, I feel it's my obligation to present this person in the best possible light that I can. And this person tried to show people in the worst possible light. And I didn't happen to agree with that approach. I was kind of upset about that. And I thought, this guy's got a podcast. And then I have a Talmud and a dear friend, I'll mention his name, Meir Strobel. He's in Baltimore. And he called me up and to give me Mussar. And he says, why don't you have more material on Torah Anytime? I said, because I don't make videos. I speak someplace and they film it and they put it up on Torah anytime if they want to. But I don't make special. He says, it's not fair. That people want to listen to you. People want to hear you. There's not enough material. You should do regular divrei Torah. And he mentioned another fellow who's on Torah anytime. I don't want to mention his name. I know in case anyone interprets it, that'd be mashpul. He says he's got hundreds of videos. He gives a shiur over here. He talks between Mincha Ma'ariv. He films it. You know what I mean? He sits down to dinner with his family. He films it. You know what I mean? He drives to work. He films it. But whatever it is, there's a million videos from this guy. You know, he says you should have more content. So all of those things came together and said maybe I should make a podcast. And I called you up and I said, I think I want to make a podcast. And you said, great. Now I had no idea what that meant. I knew nothing whatsoever about it. That's how I remember the origin. Did I leave out anything?
Well, that's approximately. Well, I don't know what was going on your side. I just know I was by your house around Rosh Hashanah 3 years ago, and I said you want to make a podcast. And first, podcasts are mostly an audio thing, like people just people talking. Like
yeah. By the way, technically, this is called a vodcast.
A vodcast.
A vodcast. It's a video.
Where's the vodka?
Yeah, because we have to do it for a special Russian. Dub it into Russian. You know, is it still being captioned for the hearing impaired?
Well, they do it automatically now. We actually, at one point, we had a bunch.
There were hearing impaired people who used to listen to the podcast.
So, and the main problem is that YouTube automatically generates these captions. We can't pull them out and put them on Torah anytime. I don't know if they even have closed captioning, but there's an automatic version, and we had all these hilarious misspellings because you try to use famous words like shep nachas, and it turns into a sack of nachos and or whatnot. all sorts of terrible things, all sorts of just very silly things. And we had someone who that's every week I get an email with here's another silly thing that's in your captions. There's another silly thing that's in your captions. So we actually reached out and we actually it's still somewhere on the website. We said hey, if anyone wants to help us out with the captioning, and a few people volunteered.
Right.
We had a few that were manually done, but it's so much work.
Yeah.
In 1 minute of speech, there are so many words, and some people, it wasn't doing it from scratch; they were just going in and correcting it.
Right.
But it seems like eventually people gave up, and I haven't heard from anyone else since. So I guess it's good enough.
Well,
But we'll see. Who knows? And one thing is for sure: those captions aren't in Russian, at least not
Indeed.
yet.
So when we move to Russian, we'll make it into a vodka cast. But
Very good.
But a podcast. I explained this in one of the early shows. Podcast is because people used to have an iPod, and they would download the recordings to their iPod and listen to it whenever they wanted. So it was called a podcast. Broadcasting 101 was one of the 4 college courses that I took.
I'm sure that came in handy.
I went to Queens College, night college, when I was in yeshiva because my parents wanted me desperately to go to college. And I took Psychology 101 and Sociology 101, not because I wanted to, but because I was thinking if I'm going to do anything, look, I'm not going to become a scientist. I'm not going to become a doctor. If anything, I would get a degree in psychology or something like that. And I remember this was in the early 70s. And we were sitting at the Shabbos table. My father says to me, "So, did you sign up for college?" So I said, "Yeah." He said, "What'd you take?" I said, Psychology 101 and Sociology 101. Psych and Soch? Every hippie moron takes Psych and Soch. Why don't you take a math class? I realized at that point that I wasn't going to make them happy anyway. But when I moved to LA, they made another big push that I should go. So I went to Valley College. And I said, no, I'm going to take what I find interesting. I took Journalism 101 and Broadcasting 101. And broadcasting, he started off by explaining, what's the term broadcasting? He says when they would throw the seeds, they would cast the seeds in a broad way so that it would reach as far as it could. Huh. And that's what broadcasting is, to be able to do it.
Now, how did it turn to radio?
So the idea was that they would do a show in the studio and the radio would cast it in a broad way all over so that people could hear it. And that's where the term broadcasting came from. So the problem was that to get a radio station or a television station was quite prohibitive. And therefore, it was limiting the amount of access of people that people could see. So when the internet came along, and suddenly anybody could put up something, who spoke about this? Jordan Peterson. He was a professor in Toronto, and he said, I put my classes up online. He says, and then I say I have 1 million views. And I realized there's some sort of a new medium that you can reach people. And that's what podcasts became. Anybody could produce their own show, only instead of broadcasting it, they called it iPod casting it, so you could move it onto your iPod and listen to whenever you wanted. But it means anybody could make a show. So sometimes, instead of just making it audio, they made it video. The actual name for that is a vodcast, because a video podcast. And that's where it comes from. Yeah. So I said to myself, how many people do I speak to? I'm in a big event. I speak in Binyanei Umah, 3,000 women. I spoke in the Javits Center, 1,000 people. Every week, there are thousands of people. And by the way, there are more people than we can possibly track, because I know there are people who put it on their WhatsApp group and they send it around. And
there are a lot of people who won't use the online version, so they download it and then they pass it around. At that point, it's totally off our radar. So we have no idea.
I met a guy. I told you this story. I met somebody from a young man who was in high school in Lakewood, and he says nobody has access to the internet except my dad because he needs it for work. So he would download it and copy it to my device, and I'd bring it to school and copy it to, everybody in the school, about 200 kids or whatever it is, and they would all listen to it. Now, I have no way of tracking those kind of things, There is a yeshiva where the Hanhala all comes together and listens to it Cassettes. So I have no way of really tracking the numbers, but the opportunity to be able to reach people. So that was my concept. But I don't know how to make a podcast. I really don't understand how any of this works. Yeah. And so then you come in one day with a camera.
Well, it wasn't the camera. I mean, the way I was really expecting an audio thing, so I brought all my audio gear, and then he's like, "No, we want to do a video." I'm like, "A video? Well, I don't have a proper video camera." So that first hostage video we did. So the setup there actually was he's there in his corner, and it's a video, and you hear him talking, and it's good.
Parenthetically, one of our listeners put together a highlight reel of just the first season, which is a lot of fun, and you can see it starts with.
Maybe we'll roll that at the end or something.
So maybe we'll put that up for everybody who wants to see some of the highlights of the first season, because you could see a lot of work went into this, and we definitely appreciate it.
Because when we were starting, we really didn't know what we were doing. So that first video, so I don't know if you remember, but the camera was like a computer webcam, like the sort of thing that you use on Skype all over Shalom. Plug into my laptop, and I was using such cheap software that it actually was changing the color every 5 seconds. It was like going through the shades of the rainbow very faintly, and it was like, this is horrendous, but I only noticed afterwards. So the color is horrendous. And this camera, we didn't have a tripod. It was actually taped to the top of a suitcase, I think it was a red rollerboard. And we opened the handle, and we taped the camera to the top of the handle. And that was it. And I think we had a normal microphone set up there, because I brought all my audio stuff, and it was a while, and eventually people, and then I think the second one, then we got a ton of feedback, and people loved it, but they were like, you're in the corner of some obscure room, what's going on here, and please help us pay the rent.
I remember somebody specifically said, you should be sitting in a big chair in front of a bookcase.
That's right. So what did we do in the next episode?
We put a big chair in front of a bookcase.
Not just a bookcase, the bookcase.
The bookcase. I have had people come from America to come and visit me and have their picture taken in front of the bookcase. So there you have it, friends.
True story. And since then, throughout everything we've been doing, I've been accused many times of using a green screen for these episodes.
Yes.
And I can tell you the accusation is completely ridiculous.
Indeed.
Which fits in with the whole theme of the show. Indeed.
Otherwise, I would be flying. I would do some Avengers stuff. But so then, we started having guests, which was unbelievable. The first guest was the Australian group.
Right. That was really early on, and that was.
I messed up his name. You had to correct it on screen.
Yes. Fogelgarn.
Fogelgarn
with an R.
Yeah, I said Fogelman. Anyway, so
it was during that episode that I hit one of the problems that has plagued me ever since we started the show.
And that is
the worst problem: naming them. Coming with titles
that
the worst. I've had times where it's because we have a show, you show up, you have no idea what we're going to talk about. I have no idea what we're going to talk about. There's no plan. Some people did in the beginning, they've got a little blurb what they're going to talk about. We have no idea. And then we talk about 6 entirely random subjects and maybe a chicken recipe. And I have to come up with a title for this thing. And I've had times where I tell you, I've got the file, it's all edited, it's ready to go, and I'm sitting here for 3 days. What am I going to call this thing? I have no idea. And at the end of it, sometimes I just give up and I call it like The True Way or something, and something really vague. But it's like,
yeah,
that's just the hardest part, And
I can tell you because when I give shiurim, I have to come up with a title. And Rabbi Tats, someone told me he was speaking, and they said, "Well, can you send me a title?" So he sends him a list of 20 titles. So he says, "Well, what are the shiurim?" He says, "Oh, I'm going to talk about whatever I want. Just pick whichever title you like."
So actually,
they have nothing to do with the,
We could probably use a list of those actually, because half the time that's what I end up doing. I'm like, I have no idea what to do with this one.
I spoke on Parshas Tetzaveh once, and I called it the legacy of Alfloso. Alfloso was one of these old magicians who was very popular in his heyday, and then he was running a magic shop, and it was kind of run down and everything. And I met him shortly before he died, and he taught me this move, and he said, "That's my move." He says, "That's my signature move. People do use it, but they don't understand. I invented that move."
Was it a good move?
It was a barehanded feather flower production. The normal way to do it is to use a cloth and then produce the flowers. And he was able to do it without a cloth. That's what he came up with. And that was his move. And I thought to myself, the person passed away, Jewish guy, Alfloso. And his legacy was this particular move to produce a feather flower bouquet barehanded. That's how he wanted to be remembered.
Did it work?
Yeah, I did the trick, but it was like...
I mean, do people remember it?
No, nobody's ever heard of Alfloso. You say Alfloso, no one's ever heard of it.
Should have done a coin trick.
In fact, when I did that shear, it was actually written up by the humor columnist in the Jerusalem Post, And I remember when I started talking about Alfloso, he just wrote Alfloso ? So yeah, no, he's not really a major historical character. But coming up with titles is always a challenge, And so that's I always wait for it to come out so I can see what the title is myself. I'm always fascinated.
Half the time I'm waiting for that.
And it's become something of an institution. I mean, I'm really amazed by the people who do it. Now, I have no idea what goes into post-production and adding this in. I mean, people don't appreciate this, that there was no band that wrote that performed the Rabbi Orlofsky theme song. If you watch the video, you produced that completely on your own. Well, Lenny just stood there playing at the
some help from some friends.
Keyboard, and you got other people to play it, and you spliced it all together, and you put it up, and So I was thinking we should do some of those things, like make some videos, action videos.
It's fun, but it's a ton of work, and
yeah, I know. I feel bad for you.
Actually,
it's not like I have to do anything.
But then I complain to you about it.
Yeah, no, not really. You really don't complain, which is really amazing. You're one of the few people in my life who don't, and everybody else does.
Lawyers help with that. I mean, actually, like about the whole editing of the show, it's most of the time. I mean, seeing as you're used to speaking in public venues, there's not a lot to do other than the occasional cough or the occasional plane flies by, or there's like the nuclear obliteration or something, and other than the occasional apocalypse, there's not much to edit out. It's like people have asked me, can you make we see you cut out things, can you make like a blooper roll? I'm like, you want a half hour from coughing? We also have
I could just do that, by the way. You don't even make a blooper reel. I'll just cough for half an hour.
We can throw in some sneezes,
Yeah.
Like once in a while, you get like that van that goes by. We can throw in some of those, but there's not. I don't think I've ever taken out like a sentence where it was like, okay.
When I used to film in the house, people upstairs would start scraping chairs and things like that.
A lot of those.
And
so on. For a while, actually, people just randomly walking in on your house in the middle. And
yes, that happens too.
We put a sign on the door. Did it help? No.
So that's the history of the Rabbi Orlofsky show the past 3 years, which I know everybody's been really wondering about. And now I understand you have some exciting plans moving forward.
Yeah, we're not ready to announce anything yet. But the first thing is that the show is going to well about the whole timing thing. So the show is officially a half hour. I don't think it's been half hour for at least 2 years, practically speaking. But we're going to be extending it a little. We're going to be adding in some segments. At the beginning, you saw our new logo at the beginning of this video. We're gonna we have to replace your mug, of course, and we've got a lot of really interesting things in the pipeline for the museum. Remember, for the museum. There are a lot of really interesting things in the pipeline that you should see rolling out in the next few weeks. And, more than that, it's like, you gotta be careful what you say publicly because then the lawyers come after you. If it's not the lawyers, it's the insurance. But other than that, we'll see. And one thing that we're actually gonna start doing next week is we're adding a new segment to the show.
Oh,
yes. And that's, we're adding like
I'm going to be doing from the latest collection of Jewish music hits. And I will be singing.
Have you heard the latest Jewish music hits?
All right, we're going to do some of the classic Jewish music hits. And my wife, I usually manage when I give a public share to sing at some point. And my wife says, really, I wanted to be a singer, but nobody would listen to me. So I became a speaker so I could get people to sit there and listen to me sing. So
it's so funny you mentioned that, actually, because there was a famous Jewish comedian who passed away recently.
Jackie Mason?
Yeah, that's the one. So he was, my grandfather actually knew him growing up. And he lived just down the block or something.
Yaakov.
It wasn't a particularly, he didn't really notice him much at the time. But apparently, I didn't know this. Apparently, he became a rabbi at one point.
Yes, he got smicha for Moshe Feinstein.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's the story. So the way I heard the story is he was a rabbi and he was giving all his sermons, and he kept throwing in these jokes and people loved it. So eventually, he realized he could just drop the rabbi thing and just become a comedian. So this is sort of the reverse.
That's one story. He tells a few different stories, It's like Lahavdil, Apparently they made a movie of the Joker's origin, Batman's villain. Everyone knows...
You already established that you're actually Batman.
Everyone knows the Joker doesn't have an origin story. He changes his story all the time because the whole point is he's just a force of chaos and he's the counter to Batman. And he has no backstory. You can't create one for him. That's the nature of him, So Lahavdil, Jackie Mason has like 3 or 4 different versions. There's only one that makes sense to me that he told of once. He says he was in the middle of giving a sermon and he was talking about controlling your taivas and the weakness of the flesh. Only this, he goes, and this blonde walks into the room and he says, and I just dropped my notes, and everyone started laughing and I realized I'm in the wrong job. He was about taiva. And I'll tell you, there's one thing that I respect very much. By the way, I heard from somebody who was close to him that he did tshuva at the end. That's what I heard.
Oh, wow.
From a family member. But he never made fun of Yiddishkeit. Never made fun of Torah. Never made fun of Yiddishkeit. He would poke fun at Jews, but he never made fun of Torah, never made fun of Yiddishkeit, ever. In fact, there was one show, he ended it, he was just singing chazonis. He really liked it, but he knew he was about taiva, So he just couldn't control himself, so he left to go into entertainment. Al Jolson. Al Jolson's father was an Orthodox chazan, and he just wanted to perform.
You have to first remind everyone who Al Jolson is.
It's a waste of time. I realize, the next... my Jake's position is going to be a rabbi in a retirement community because most of the people who understand my jokes are dead already. So I have to be very careful. So I have to shoot for a certain audience. It's like usually I tell a joke and there's like 2 people laughing, and or everybody else laughs too because they understand that it's a joke. I just didn't understand it, but it's not. It's a concern to me. The joke I'm sure is funny. I just don't get it. So yeah. So. Yeah, so I ever told you a story when I was offered to go to Hollywood?
No, I haven't heard it, actually.
You can't? I can't believe it. I can't believe you don't know the story. I don't know if I ever told it on the podcast. I guess not, because you would have heard it.
No.
I was teaching in L.A., and one of the kids' parents was a Hollywood agent. And he heard me speak. I was young. And he says to me, kid, you got what it takes. Now, you have to remember, this was during the era when stand-up comics were all getting their own TV shows, the late 70s. So he said, we'll put together an act. we'll start working the clubs. And within a few years, I see you having your own TV show, and I even think we can make the move into movies. So I said, let me think about it. I came home and I thought it through. I said, let's say he's right. What I told my Yetzer Hara is, everybody and his brother thinks he's going to be a star, I said, but let's say he's right. So at the end of my life, I get up to Shemayim, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu says, I gave you all these koiches, and what did you use it for? For fame and fortune? To spend it on yourself? You could use it to teach Torah.
Wow.
So I came back, and I said, cut off my arms and legs. Oh, no, that was the wrong story. But anyway, so, because I delayed 3 days. But anyway, I turned that down. But, I have often wondered. There was a tekufa when I would speak, and when I had groups from L.A., there would be directors or producers or, actors, etc. And they come up to me and say, that was great. I said, you think I could make it? And they would hand me their agent's card. I have a stack of them at home. It says, if you're interested, give me a call. I'll put you in touch with my agent. Yeah, I could have had, instead of Seinfeld, it could have been Orlofsky. I don't know, it doesn't have the same ring to it, I guess. But anyway, I said...
That's a little rebranding hint.
I think, Kodesh Baruch Hu gave me the koiches to try to... What I try, and that's why I always, when I had that, you'll see it in the highlight reel, when I talked about this as a show and not a shiur. There are plenty of shiurim on Torah Anytime. There are hundreds of them.
I think last I checked, and that was before we even started the show, it was like 48,000. They're probably double that now.
And there's a line of people waiting. Hundreds of rabbis are waiting to get on.
They're probably by 100,000 now.
And I could do one of those shiurim where I go, let's talk about Avraham Avinu and Parshas Lech Lecha, because there is a fascinating insight. There are thousands of those, right? And I said I wanted to provide a Torah content that was entertaining. And I've gotten emails from people who say, listen, I don't watch any shiurim. I can't handle them. But I watch your podcast. And I do manage to slip in some content here and there, And
occasionally gets through the editing. Sometimes I miss it.
Something that has to be dubbed in, And that's really, I have to say, and I might be wrong here, but I think this is a unique show. I don't think there's anything like this out there that I can think of, that I've come across. If there is, I'd like to know. But, where they try to provide Torah in an entertaining way that people could enjoy. And that's what we're trying for. So you said there's a new segment coming up.
Yeah, so we're something we're going to start doing starting next week. Is we're actually going to have like a very, very... A lot of people ask me about this, like having like sort of like being able to have sort of like Q&A thing. The problem is you can really make whole shows out of it, and you even had entire series of shiurim dedicated to various people's questions and answers. So we're gonna have this new thing. It's up on the website now, rabbiorlofsky.com/QA. You can submit a short question, and we're going to have like the last 10 minutes of this year is Rabbi Orlofsky is going to address your particular question. It can literally be anything, like everything from what is your favorite color, to like can you explain?
That is a deep cut.
That to like.
You're gonna get me thrown off of Nucky Radio again. Anyway,
I think we're actually. I actually haven't verified this, but when they put us back on, the guy told me that they actually have a separate section.
The Rabbi Orlofsky section.
I don't know what else is in there, but we're not in the standard list anymore. We were there, but you have to dig around a little.
So.
So anything from random things like that, like can you explain why there's these 3 stones in the Choshen and they line up with the right spheres, and whatever you send in, I don't know if we can answer it, but we'll definitely have to give it a shot.
You also mentioned the idea that eventually we're going to do like a live Q&A where people can actually put in submit questions and comments as we're going. Which, again, is always a trick with the time zones and everything. But
yes. If there's one thing that COVID has taught us, it's Zoom and time zones. And I can tell you, if we're trying to set up a shiur and trying to coordinate, between very large amounts of people and like who, what, and when and where, it's a nightmare. It's like we still have all sorts of weird things. When we have MCLS and shiurim, and I think there's still a whole bunch of quizzes. I don't think I ever turned them off of like for people to try to figure out what times, what days. It's nuts. And the funny thing, the funny thing with the Zoom shiurim, like people think we started that because of Corona.
No, they go way back.
We actually started a few months. I think it was January of last year. So that's January 2020. There was the new Daf Yomi cycle. And now you've been giving a Daf Yomi shiur for a number of years now.
I'm in my third cycle.
So decades then.
Yeah.
So
there was, I've had people over the years who said, gee, I'd like to come to your Daf Yomi shiur. Could we do it? So we started one online. And, we have a small cadre of very dedicated people who come. Every day.
Orlofsky.com/live.
And then we started a Michoel shiur, and because of the timing, we have two different of those that are also online. And it's also a very.
If you count your in-person ones, which we also do on Zoom now, I think there's 4 now.
Well, there's one in Harnov, but we're finishing up in the last parak over there, and then I've got
it's not even 2042 yet.
And then it's Tailstone is live. And I have 2 online that are left. So, yeah, and the Daf Yomi every day. So
I was just amazed by how the timing turned out because I decided just randomly because for this Daf Yomi thing I showed up. I set up a green screen. We set up all the software. I looked into video software. Zoom was the best one. We had everything set up. Well, 3 months later, Corona hits. We weren't expecting. Now I haven't seen you. Today is the first day I've seen you since March of 2020. It's in the middle. That was.
I haven't aged.
Well, I have. But that was episode 83. And so suddenly Corona hits and we're stuck and I don't know what we're going to do. And then I realized 3 months ago we set up a whole studio in your room.
Yeah.
And everything was
only my arm would disappear every now and then.
Well, there are side effects, being trapped in our houses had some effects on people and disappearing organs is not unusual.
That's right.
Especially if you're in Colombia.
So.
And so on. So it sort of just really rolled from there. And so we've got a lot of exciting things rolling out in the next few months. But definitely, if you want to submit a question for next week's shiur or for any of the further ones, or if you want to find out what Rabbi Orlofsky's favorite color is, go over to RabbiOrlofsky.com/QA, and there should be a link somewhere here. And that's a new exciting segment. We've got a few more things we're going to add in, but we're going to be starting with that coming next week.
So we're starting our 4th year, and I wanted everyone to know that all of the Torah that has been learned and all of the inspiration that has been gotten is all in the schus of Michoel. He did the whole thing, and I just sit and talk. But before Michoel came along, I would just sit in my room and talk, and there was no camera or anything, and I would just sit and talk to myself. And, and every now and then my wife would say, could you be quiet? And I would just keep talking. And now I talk, and thousands of people are listening, and that's all in your schus. So.
Yes, well, something that, a while. So one of the weird things we have with this show, and I guess we should probably wrap up with this, is, you do get, there's a lot of positive feedback, but sometimes you get a lot of weird things that come in. Like I recall we had one guy, he sent this thing in, and because, if the comment is too strange, then the systems flag it, and they get sent to me for review to see, like, what is this? We had one guy who said, Yoshka's coming, and here's his address. Like somewhere in Georgia, somewhere. I'm like, oh well, that's good to know. It's like there he is. All sorts of weird things come in. Either way, we had one person who said, there's no way this producer exists. No such thing. Must be his wife.
I told you, I've heard this from other people too.
So I actually got a message that said that, and I said, wow, this is an amazing level. Because the famous Chazal says, Mahu Rachom, Mafata Rachom. He's merciful. He should be merciful. He's kind. You should be kind. I said, I got a new level here. Yeah. Everyone says he doesn't exist. They don't say I exist.
People think that I suffer from. Not schizophrenia, the other one, psychoses. I'm trying to think of which the term is.
Wait, the voices are telling me.
Where you imagine things, and you hear voices and you imagine people. So it's like, oh, the producer. Yeah, okay. Yeah, he's right over here. Yes, the producer. All right, Michoel. Congratulations. 3 years we managed to do this. And that's it for this show. Next week, Mitzvah Hashem will still be in the Rabbi Orlofsky studio, please God, and it'll be good. So to find out more about the show, you can visit. I have the official paper now because I used to just wing this. Yeah, to find out more about the show, visit RabbiOrlofsky.com. live online shiurim, exclamation mark. Learn more at RabbiOrlofsky.com/live. Daf Yomi Masil Sharm. For sponsorships, visit RabbiOrlofsky.com/sponsor. And of course, as Michoel mentioned, new RabbiOrlofsky.com/QA. There's also RabbiOrlofsky.com/music. If you want to see the music video or download it or get the words. Yeah. And the special shout out to all of my guests over the years. And of course, Lenny Solomon. Mwah. Yeah, I have this whole fancy theme song now. You know what I mean? Every now and then, when my wife picked up this expression, from her mother, she'd say, "Oh, that's gonna." I start to say something. Goes, "Oh, that's gonna be your new theme song?" And I said, "No, I already have a theme song."
Be careful, you might do a sequel.
How many people have a theme song? It's my own theme song. I used to talk on a radio show here. I used to do it Dvar Torah. Erev Shabbos, and so I made him use what's his name, Glazer's Shabbos, Sam Glazer. You know what? Bum bum bum, da 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 dun dun dun. When you're dun da 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 da. 'Cause it's Shabbos, 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 good Shabbos, Shabbos. No, anyway, so Ruben Subar had a show, and eventually he stopped using it because he just thought it was too annoying. Anyway, well, I love that song. And Rabbi, if you want to submit a question, RabbiOrlofsky.com/QA. And that's it for this week. I am Dovid Orlofsky. And Michoel, the producer.
Thank you.
And this has been the third anniversary Rabbi Orlofsky show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode. And we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky show.
All right, it's a wrap.
What's the line? What's the Looney Tunes line?
That's all, folks.
That's all, folks.
Porky Pig.